code provided for review. Dreams of Another is the latest effort from the team at Q Games, the artist behind the Pixel Junk series. Common consensus is that the series has had some strong hits and rough misses, one that I myself subscribe to, personally adoring multiple games, including Pixel Junk Eden and Pixel Junk Shooter. The central theme for Dreams of Another is no creation without destruction, and while that is wholly fulfilled thematically, I think that it's extended across the intended boundaries and instead actively disillusioned me with the series and made me feel more like I was trapped in a nightmare.
It's a balloon with a wedding ring from a divorced person.
Gross. I don't get your motives at all. Ew.
The majority of what you'll be doing in Dreams of Another is using an assortment of random weaponry to shoot at your surrounding environments, converting them from pixelated blobs of colour to more distinguishable environments. While this is instantly satisfying both mechanically and visually, the feeling unfortunately doesn't last. It quickly becomes a tedium to sweep through the admittedly small environments to find collectibles and NPCs to progress the story, especially given the slow movement speed of the player character. Speaking of story, it's relatively ambiguous by design as you traverse dreamscapes and memories, but this was often disorienting in an unpleasant way that led to essentially no emotional attachment or investment in the events I watched transpire. Making matters worse, the voice acting in the game is among the worst I've ever heard. Again, this could be spun as intentional, otherworldly and abnormal, but if that was the intention, then it doesn't convey well.
But this atmosphere... it's nice, right?
With how monotonous, slow, emotionless and disinterested the voice actors appear to be, it made my playthrough that much more of a slog, and unfortunately had me skipping through dialogues and cutscenes as often as possible.
A big blue fish. Would that be you by any chance?
Are you the one who come from this ocean? If that's true, please tell us where the path to freedom is.
So excited.
The writing is similarly obtuse and over-explanatory in its poetic ambiguity, reminiscent in some ways of Kojima's self-indulgent descriptive style, but with none of the cinematic flair or self-aware humour that usually salvages games of that ilk. These issues are then compounded by the fact that the game has a pretty poor onboarding process. It immediately drops you into a scenario with no context, teaches you a couple of the controls that you can't actually fully act on for narrative reasons, and progresses at a snail's pace. You won't be able to begin actually engaging with the game properly for about 10 minutes, which, in fairness, isn't the longest time, but it felt like an eternity in practice. Something else to note is that Dreams of Another has VR support for PSVR2, which I tested out for the opening hours of my playthrough. Usually, VR compatibility for me can salvage even mediocre titles by providing a unique experience and interface for players. It therefore breaks my heart to say that I categorically implore those looking to play this game to avoid the VR version at all costs. It's among the most disorienting and poorly implemented that I've seen. Though the aesthetic of the game admittedly does really shine in VR, and firing the guns feels good enough with the Sense controllers, everything else about the experience actively soured the time I had with the game. Certain controls and button inputs seem to refuse to work in VR sometimes, but tooltips still do pop up on screen and they confuse me on whether I was unable to do something because I was in the VR version, or if the game simply wasn't functioning correctly. Cutscenes, as is often the case with VR titles, switch out to a flat screen experience, but these occur with such frequency and the window is so much smaller than I've come to expect, that it was far more jarring and felt like I was watching scenes from inside a small box rather than the usual home cinema experience. This is, of course, accompanied with a tried and true flashbang fade to white that became all too common of a crutch as a transition. There are also a handful of perspective puzzles and third-person sequences that, even if they're technically completable, feel like the VR implementation was an afterthought. The aiming, camera placement, or even player navigation in these third-person sections in VR seems broken at times. And if they're not, then they feel wrong, and yet another symptom that draws me out of the experience as much as I was eager to stay immersed. Though the story clearly has elements of emotionality, gameplay is repeatedly interrupted with somewhat contextless cutscenes.
Please feel free to take a look.
So you just saw me being told to look around by an NPC, then immediately having the level end, seeing a robot running down an alley in a brand new environment, and then being mysteriously kicked back to the main menu. And here in the background you see the incoherent jumping around happening once again. Now, while the environments, NPCs and dialogue ultimately make some form of cohesive sense by the end of the game, their scattershot implementation as little teasers don't work at all and made me feel like I was quite literally going insane. Objectives remain unclear throughout your playtime. Teleportation to new environments briefly before being returned back is a constant trope, and the aforementioned performances being drab truly ended up breaking my resolve.
I love making children happy.
Progression is also unpredictable and vague, where it can be incredibly difficult to distinguish what to do in order to progress. It's even worse in terms of determining who or what to avoid interacting with if you intend on fully exploring the numerous environments in the game. As a completionist, this was a major pain point for me, as I'd be forced against my will to leave a section early after interacting with an item in the environment that I didn't know would move me on, or getting close to a specific NPC intentionally, or even just trying to get around them. The collectibles scattered on the ground throughout the level are always satisfying to uncover as you explore, but they hold little to no contextual or narrative value. They can be given to a certain NPC in order to refill ammo for unique weapons, increase maximum ammo capacity, and unlock special upgrades for the player character. While these upgrades are welcome, they ultimately do very little to shake up or even improve the gameplay loop. And though some of the more unique encounters and sections in the game can be quite interesting in terms of their design, that design ends up becoming frustrating and progress inhibitive more often than not.
I'm getting kinda excited now.
Along with these NPC interactions, you're occasionally presented with choices in dialogue, or in the case of the upgrade NPC, choosing which item to give them rather than letting them pick one for themselves. Having completed the game, I have no idea whatsoever on what material impact, if any, these choices had. And in conversation, the options you're presented with have as little context as the conversation itself.
Oh, it works. I'm quite fond of it. Riding it makes me feel all dreamy. My wife forced me to ride it at first, but now I've become obsessed.
Now, let us begin the long-awaited tour of the rides. Let's get a move on.
I'm aware that Pixel Junk has a track record of being unique, quirky, a little janky, and often Marmite, you either love them or hate them. But at the end of the day, Dreams of Another presents you with a unique and interesting art style and a game concept that is quite compelling. On paper. In practice, in my opinion, it falls apart in almost every regard, and had me exasperated and longing for the experience to be over way before I rolled credits. I deeply appreciate attempts to subvert expectations or turn gameplay tropes and mechanics on their head, even if they don't work, so I have to give credit to the game for attempting such a feat. But like being on a roller coaster stuck upside down halfway around the loop, the perspective it provides can be novel, but it doesn't mean I want to stay on the ride. Video games are art, and I respect the vision of the developers for seeing it through and putting it out for people to experience, absorb, and discuss. But Dreams of Another ultimately ended up being a dream I was all too desperate to wake up from.
Fine. It's a little scary, but I'll try.
Are you having fun, everyone? There are 3 robots left for the performance.